office came down to the basement where Lauren had the trainings, and she kind of just did like a final, walkthrough of how her training would go, and so that we could all, really it was so that Shannon could see if it, I guess it was up to her standards, pretty much, if Lauren was doing it right, or, but no, I never sat in on an actual training.
You were aware that we were short people that year for staff, for our poll workers. For
the poll workers?
Yeah, Hayfork was terribly understaffed.
Right, yeah. And I do know that we had a lot of people from District 3 especially that, were wanting to be poll workers.
Right. And were you aware of anything to do with the Hmong at that point? Because that's when the Hmong really became a large part of the community, where they were registering at that time and wanted to participate in the election process. Mm-hmm. Anything you remember about that?
I can't really recall on any Hmongs wanting to be a part of the, being a poll worker, anything like that. The only thing that really comes to my mind about the polls and the Hmong community are they requested a translator, and I don't know, still to this day, I don't know if it is Shannon's job or her title, if it's their job to find certified translators, but I do know that the Hmong requested one, and she kind of just, without even putting any effort into it, she kind of just said, oh, there's nobody, or I don't know anybody like that, there's nobody around here that's a certified Hmong translator, and she didn't help them with it at all, and so they had to, I guess, kind of wing it if they didn't. I don't know if they're I don't know what.
Were you aware of the problem that existed with the people registering from Post Mountain that had neighbors that were allowed to come in and vote at the polls, but yet they had to vote by mail?
No, I don't know. I wasn't aware of anybody about, because Post Mountain aren't they a vote by mail?
No, they're not. That somehow some of them are and some of them aren't. We're not quite sure where the boundary is, but neighbors are neighbors. It appeared that anybody new registering became mail-in only that year.
So District 5, I don't even remember if there was a poll site in District 5.
Hayfork is.
So that.
And that's what I'm saying. People would come to the Hayfork poll from Post Mountain and vote. And the problem existed where.
So 3 and 5 were in the same poll?
Same poll, right.
Okay, okay, that sounds familiar now.
And what happened, along with a lot of these people being, the registration not being accepted, mm-hmm. and them not knowing about it, mm-hmm. then when they came to the poll place, they couldn't vote there, and their mailing address, a lot of them didn't know what their mailing address is, but they had a mailing address. They live in Post Mountain, so they had used their old mailing address, Minnesota or wherever it was, mm-hmm. and the ballots went there. Mm-hmm. And when insisted upon, they were forced to go to Weaverville to vote.
Provisionals?
To vote provisional, and they weren't even allowed to do provisionals at the Hayfork precinct polling place.
They had to come to
the office.
I remember a lot of people came into the elections office to vote provisional on election day.
Right, and that's just not, that was a 4-hour turnaround for these people.
Right, absolutely, yeah. So I don't really recall any so there were a lot of people from the precincts, voters from the precincts that were vote by mail, but how do I say this? I don't remember it being like a specific, it wasn't like, watch out for this precinct, they're vote by mail. Like it,
Right.
I don't know if this makes sense, but I know that there are vote by mail precincts only, but I don't remember it, kind of like being specified. I just went by if they were in this precinct. The DIM system that we use already knew like this precinct is a vote by mail, and so you didn't even. And a lot of those people would still mark they wanted to be vote by mail only, whether they marked it or not. they were, if they were in that precinct, they were vote by mail. But I don't, I don't remember it being specific, but I do remember it being an issue. So if anybody from the precincts, or no, not from anybody, I guess I will just specify it, the Hmong community was a huge percentage of the voters that we had issues with. They would put, if we had any, issues with their their affidavits, cards, whether it be their name, their signature, their address, they didn't put a social or a driver's license. If they didn't fill out the necessary things that needed to be on there, we would, because that was my job, I would send them a notice saying, this wasn't complete or whatever. I would send them a new registration card. You need to fill this out and send it back in. A lot of the Hmong community had Fresno, a lot of different mailing addresses, and so if there was another way to contact these voters, I did, whatever I could, because, it wasn't, we're trying to disqualify voters, we're trying to qualify voters. So I did whatever I could, to get a hold of these people. If mailing addresses were the only way, then I would send them a notice saying, this is what's wrong with it. And a lot of the people didn't respond. And, it didn't really click in my mind that, oh, maybe it's because I sent it to Fresno or, whatever their mailing address on there was.
Yeah.
So, it definitely was a huge issue, and I can only say that for the registration cards that I processed. I wasn't the only person processing registration cards, and I don't know if anybody put in as much effort as I did into trying to track down these voters to let them know if there was an issue.
So did you feel like the main objective was to disqualify rather than qualify?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was at Shannon's direction?
So anytime I didn't ever disqualify without going to Shanna. I ran anything that I had an issue with, or if I couldn't read something, I, would always take it to Shanna, and say, can you read this name, or can you, is there something that I'm missing that, how can we qualify this voter? And so, a lot of it was, well, this name seems the same, so we're not running these, or, it was absolutely, she didn't put effort into any of, trying to qualify the voters. It was really, and then, I don't know, I always felt like John Finley was, honest to me, but Shanna and John had a lot of one-on-ones in her office. And I don't know, I can't say whether they were, if John was asking her to be honest or if they were being dishonest. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But it seemed like after the first couple of times that him and his, I don't remember what the guy's name was that was always with him.
His partner.
His partner. He, after the first couple of meetings that Shanna had with them, it was kind of like, I remember for a little while she was asking any voters, any Hmong voters or any voters from this precinct, give me their registration cards, we're having an issue with them. Or I would have to make a copy of them, anyone that came through, and bring the original to Shanna, so that I had proof that I had received them. That's why I started taking copies of them.
Specifically for that district.
Mm-hmm. Yep, for District 5.
And what happens to the registration cards that were disqualified?
They still go in the batch, so we scan them through as a batch, and they each get a batch, I think we scanned up to 10 in a batch, and each 10 got a batch number, and so they would still be scanned through, and then, I'm trying to remember on the computer how the process went. If there was something, we would capture their signature on it, but if there was something that there was a reason why we didn't disqualify or didn't qualify them, we would put a reason code on, why they weren't active. So it wasn't like we just deleted the card from the system and it was gone. Or I didn't anyway, I can only speak for what I did.
Right.
I put a reason on there as to why they were not active, and, put a little note in there as to what I did, so that if anybody wanted to go back through and see what my reasoning was, it wasn't just not active. It was not active because, I couldn't get a hold of them, or, they never got back and did another card, or the signature, address, anything like that.
That's interesting. So there is a file that exists of those registration cards someplace.
They should be in DIMS. So when you scan through, when you scan the batch through,
Wait a minute. Let's start. Why don't you explain DIMS? How
So-
DIMS works? That'll help.
so DIMS is, it's a state system. It's what this, the Secretary of State uses. It's the voter system for California.
Right.
And not every county uses it. So there's DIMS, and there was another one that I'm not sure why.
That's fine.
It doesn't really make sense to me because, like, now that I'm saying it out loud, it doesn't make sense because the whole point of DIMS that I thought was so that at the whole state, every county in the state was on the same page. Like, you know what I mean? It was all so that it could talk to each other, so that there wasn't a voter in Trinity and in Shasta or wherever. As soon as you start, tried to register somebody, if they were registered in another county, the system was created to catch it. There was duplicates, and then you had to call the registrar and figure where this person really lived and which county they should be registered in. But so DIMS, I thought was a whole state, or Trinity, California.
Okay. But so when you enter this, the information, you get an affidavit for a voter.
Mm-hmm.
You'd enter the information in. That would go into the DIMS system automatically.
Yep.
Okay.
You scan their registration card into DIMS.
Right. And part of that registration process, you scanned in separate the signatures. Is that correct?
No, you don't scan this. No. So you would just scan the affidavit in,